Hello everyone, we are Group 4. Today we're gonna talk about the organized option to the gig economy. Grab shows the core contradiction of gig economy. On the one hand, the platform uses data, algorithm, and the digital networks to coordinate services really efficiently. But here's the catch. Control stay with Grab. Well, most of risk gets shifted to the drivers and the riders. So, what does that actually mean for workers? It means income instability, very limited protection, and constant pressure from platform rules. You are technically your own boss. You are also getting penalized if you don't accept enough trips or if the algorithm decide you are not performing. That's actually why labor groups, activists, and the regulator keep pushing for better working conditions, especially during the COVID-19 when gig workers were hit really hard. Now, why does this problem persist? It's not a temporary glitch. This tension is built directly into Grab business model. The platform relies on shifting risk to workers to stay flexible and profitable. So as long as the module stays in place, the same contradiction keep coming back. No matter how much options grows from workers, activists, or lawmakers.
As my colleague just showed, Grab control through algorithms but shifts risk to workers. That contradiction is now exploding into organized opposition across Southeast Asia. I will show how this is already reshaping Grab's entire business. Singapore forces Grab to pay CPF and work injury insurance. Malaysia covers 1.2 million workers and bans unilateral rate changes. The Philippines bans independent contractor classification. Indonesia may cut Grab's commission from 20% to 10%. After 25,000 drivers struck in May, these pressures hit every part of Grab. Financing. California's Proposition 22 shows reclassification could add $1.1 billion in costs. Grab's fourth quarter flagged Indonesia as a material risk. Ride-hailing. The strike took 25,000 drivers offline. Grab warns reclassification would leave only 17% of drivers. Food delivery. Shared drivers spreads disruption. 19% of GrabFood merchants are small businesses with no alternative. Fintech. Revenue grew 42% to $92 million. Loans reached $1.3 billion. But this relies on drivers' data. If drivers leave, fintech stops. A Malaysian court exposed a legal gap Acc- accelerating reform. In September, users used Grab's app to send supplies to protesters. The app became a battlefield. Bottom line, costs rising, supply threatened, every segment infected. This is not a future risk, it is already happening.
Moving to how the gig controversy penetrates Grab business model. Grab ride-hailing business is fundamentally built on gig workers who are classified as independent contractors. This allows the company to maintain flexible workforce and minimize labor costs. However, the gig economy controversy directly penetrates this model through several key mechanisms. First, labor group and activists challenge the classification of drivers. They argue that drivers should be treated as employees rather than independent contractors. If this reclassification occurs, Grab would be required to provide benefits such as CPF contribution, insurance, and minimum wages protection. This would significantly increase operating costs and undermine Grab's low-cost advantage. Second, governments are increasingly responding to those pressure through regulation. In Singapore, Reform to improve protection for platform workers indicate a shift toward greater state intervention. Thus, policy increasing compliance costs and reduced flexibility that Grab depend on. Third, labor activism affect driver behavior. Protest dissatisfaction and income instability may lead driver to reduce working hours or leave the platform. This this disturb driver supply, leading to longer waits and higher fare, which ultimately affects service quality and customer experience. Additionally, public concern about worker exploitation can damage Grab reputation. Consumer may become more sensitive to ethical issues which can influence demand. At the same time, investors may view increasingly regulation, pressure, and rising costs as long-term risk to profitability. Overall, the gig economy controversy does not just affect Grab internally, it penetrates deeply into its cost structure, labor supply, and operational efficiency, ultimately reshaping its business model into one that more regulation, less flexibility, and more costly.
Now I will explain why Grab must understand this issue. Opposition to the gig economic is not just a PR problem and cannot be without. It comes from Grab's business model. Using contractor labor keeps costs flexible, ensure competitive pricing, and supports rapid expansion, but also creates work dissatisfaction noticed by activist unions and governments. Thus, the model driving growth also creates recurring pressure, which is structural and may tension suffer rather than fade. This matters even more because Grab operates across Southeast Asia. When one country introduces stronger rules for platform workers that can influence debates and policy changes in neighboring markets. For Grab, that means the challenge is not limited to one parties or one court cause. It can become a regional problem that raises compliance costs and make expansion more difficult in several countries at once. It is also important to remember that Grab is not just a red-herring company. It is a super app with connected services such as delivery, logistics, and fintech. If a conflict in red herring affects driver's play or service quality, the impact can spread across the wide platform that can hurt consumer trust, weaken relationship, and even investor confidence. So the key point is this. Gig opposition is not a temporal store around Grab. It is a structural consequence of how Grab creates its value. Because of that, it can reshape the company's costs, its regulatory risks, and its future growth. That is why this issue is a persistent structural condition for Grab, not a short-term disruption.